You are listening to Curious Cat, a podcast that examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. And I'm your host, Jennifer Holtz. Join me every week as I examine what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. Hello, I hope you're well. I'm grateful to be with you today. We're talking about fear and all its subtle iterations. This episode was born from a discussion on another podcast called The Theory of Everything, and it's hosted by Curt Jaimungal. It's a favorite of mine, both for the array of topics, but most of all for the way Jaimungal creates these conversations that are both in-depth and curiosity-driven. He presents them in this respectful yet kind way. I highly recommend it. But back to fear. In this particular episode, he was speaking with Elizondo and Cahill about UFOs and consciousness. They were talking about the disclosure of government files pertaining to UFOs. And after asking why there's this resistance on the part of the government to disclose information to the public, I think it was Cahill that said that it could result in mass fear, like mass hysteria. And Jaimungal asked, what can we do to prepare the public? As I was listening to the podcast, like is often the case, I was running, and I had to pause the stream to write down my thought, my answer basically, which was, we need to teach ourselves to react to fear with curiosity, not violence. And that's how this topic came to be. So it sounds simple enough, but fear is anything but simple. As usual, I'd like to be purposeful with our language. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines fear as an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger, anxious concern, or cause for alarm. After reading 2 books on the subject to prepare for this episode, watching a handful of TED Talks, marking up, I think it was like 7, 8 articles on the topic, I've learned mostly that fear at its core is a messenger of intuition, or that internal knowing. And the cause of the fears can be broken into 2 parts, internal forces and external forces. In other words, the stuff we choose to participate in that scares us, and the stuff that happens to us without our control. That distinguishing feature makes the most difference in our reaction to fear. But as you've come to know well, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Our Western culture is mostly fear-driven, obsessed even. Author Gavin de Becker says, many of our fear-driven practices are due to the machinations of a group of 10 sociopaths. From his book, The Gift of Fear, quote, we are searched for weapons before boarding a plane, visiting City Hall, seeing a television show taping, or attending a speech by the president. Our government buildings are surrounded by barricades, and we wrestle through so-called tamper-proof packaging to get a couple aspirin. All of this was triggered by the deeds of fewer than 10 dangerous men who got our attention by frightening us. What other quorum in American history, save those who wrote our Constitution, could claim as much impact on our day-to-day lives? Since fear is so central to our experience, understanding when it is a gift and when it is a curse is well worth the effort. End quote. But we'll go further into that later in the episode. Fear undoubtedly provides us with lots of entertainment in Western culture. The popularity of thrill rides, like roller coasters and anything with a big plunge, brings big bucks to Universal and Disney. From subreddits like creepypasta to horror movies to spooky ghost hunting shows to October towns that fill with those haunted houses and more, many of us, myself included, love to be scared. It's entertaining, isn't it? It's why, as a kid, I couldn't get my hands on enough Stephen King novels, even though they gave me nightmares. Fear in that way can be a form of escapism. So there must be something about it that is interesting to our bodies and our minds. When we're frightened, what happens to them? From UW Medicine's article titled, "This is Your Body on Fear," the amygdala takes over. It's a part of your brain, and that controls the fight or flight instinct. Your heart rate and blood pressure increase. You breathe faster. Your muscles tense up. Your eyes dilate. You sweat. Your whole digestive system slows down. There's a whole group of thrill seekers that have become addicted to this. We call them adrenaline junkies. That term, adrenaline junkies, was first popularly used in the 1991 movie Point Break, in reference to people who favor high-risk activities for the rush that accompanies them. Related to this phenomenon, many people seek out high sensation experiences for that neurophysiological effect. When dependence on these experiences is created as a way of managing stressful situations, it might be time to seek treatment, warns Very Well Mind in their article titled, "How to Tell If You're an Adrenaline Junkie." So what's the science behind that need for stimulation? Fear releases some chemicals from our amygdala, which in studies, researchers found leads to a decrease in avoidance behaviors. It also releases neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, both of which regulate our brain activity and sleep functions, just to name a couple, and whose healthy levels counteract depression. In fact, some scientists speculate that some of these adrenaline junkies actually jump into their adventure-filled exploits because they have low serotonin and dopamine levels, and they find that the risky behavior will give them the burst of serotonin and dopamine they need to be a natural fix. They don't maybe know that on a cognitive level, but their bodies have kind of figured this out. A 2016 study of adrenaline junkies found that regular rock climbers experienced frequent and intense craving states. They experienced negative effects when they stopped climbing, similar to individuals with substance use disorders. You don't have to be a bank robber or a skydiver to become addicted to everyday sensation seeking. In fact, you could be a tad hooked on stimulation and not realize it. Well, you're about to realize it. That unconscious need for stimulation may impact the way you manage your schedule, the people you spend time with, and even the way you approach a deadline. Like we're creating our own drama. A 2010 study suggests that individuals may create drama and crisis in their lives to trigger the body's stress response and get the rush that comes with excitement and attenuate their negative mood. If you're like me and tend to feed off the thrill of nearly missing a deadline, then you're in good company. A 2004 study showed that high-risk athletes scored highest in emotional stability. Think about that. How is it possible? Well, participating in high-risk sports doesn't mean these athletes are fearless. In fact, their level of harm avoidance is nearly the same as yours and mine. They spend much of their time and energy seeking to manage their risk. That's the kind of unsexy part of adventure sports. They require the ultimate planning and agonizing over fine details. It's a boring reality, I guess. They analyze every minutia of weather, wind direction, route, gear. They're pre-training for the event. It's intense, and they have to work on it daily. They're the most conditioned athletes out there, typically. In fact, one athlete said on his way to a dangerous event, he drives like a grandma. So he's doing a super risky sport, but he takes care because he knows statistically he has more chance of getting in an accident on the way to the thing than the thing itself because he's planned and trained so hard. So why do they do it? Why climb the mountain, jump out of that plane? One climber, Townsend, points it out this way. In cities, you have crosswalks, sidewalks, elevators. You're told exactly where to go at what times, and you don't even interact with the environment. Whereas when you get to the bottom of a mountain, you think, I can go up any way I want, and it's up to you and your own imagination on how to get down. Put another way, Mahatma Gandhi once said, live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. That's true for adventure athletes, but the rest of us as well. I mentioned at the top, the fear we choose to participate in feels very different from the fear that happens to us. We all know this intimately after enduring a global pandemic, but for the skeptics out there, the raw truth is, even if we chose to live in a bubble, and in all ways we could control our environments, scary events will still happen to us. It's an inevitability. It's a casualty of being alive and mortal. That fear is a rarity, an exception. Most of us, though, are letting statistical anomalies rule our every breath, and that is not healthy. In fact, it keeps us from thriving. Maybe if we bore down on fear, we can learn to better coexist with it and even learn to listen to the lessons it offers up. TEDx speaker Trevor Reagan calls fear our lizard brain. And in his talk titled How to Overcome Fear, he said we are playing a different video game now with software that's thousands of years old. Letting our lizard brain dominate or sit in that driver's seat keeps us afraid to fail. Yeah, fear gets in the way of us having an experience. When he said that, it hit home for me. Especially as I think about this tender post-lockdown world. If you're nervous to take that first airplane trip, imagine not doing it. Missing out on what's on the other end of that journey, that loved one, that experience. Let the fear of missing out help you stretch your comfort zone. It's just an idea. He also said, one of the worst things we can do is cut out our lizard brain. It's ingrained in us, and if we don't acknowledge that it's speaking, this will make our fears grow. That's called avoidance. If our lizard brain alarm is set off by something, say public speaking, and we ignore it, then that lizard brain has learned that public speaking is so terrifying that it's not even safe to consider it. See how that works? The fear goes from being a nuisance to a 5-alarm fire. So can we make room for fear? Can we truly coexist with it? Author Liz Gilbert, in her book Big Magic, says we must. She noticed a trend, a disturbing trend, that when people attempt to kill their fear, they often end up inadvertently murdering their creativity in the process. She says this alone means we must make space for fear. She writes, quote, basically your fear is like a mall cop who thinks he's a Navy SEAL. He hasn't slept in days, he's hopped up on Red Bull, and he's liable to shoot at his own shadow in an absurd effort to keep everyone safe. When her fear speaks up, she looks it dead in the eye and listens, then in her strongest voice reminds fear that it's relegated to the back seat. It will not, nor will it ever, be allowed to drive. Later on, she even yawns in the face of fear, saying, I finally realized that my fear is boring. Why? Because it's the same thing every day. There's no variety to it, no depth, no substance, no texture. It never surprises or delights me. She distinguishes between the fear we need for basic survival and the other stuff, the fear to take a risk in your career or the like, something like that. In that vein, she says, those that are truly fearless are sociopaths or reckless 3-year-olds. You don't need fear to pursue a creative life. You don't need fear to be triggered by your creativity or risk-taking. Hypervigilant or overprotective. Ugh, no. Fear, the anxiety that isn't associated with saving your actual life from an actual imminent threat, that fear needs to be managed. Here are some powerful ways to overcome fear right now. Evaluate your risks. Sometimes fear comes from simply not knowing very much about the thing that you fear. For example, you might be afraid of airplanes because you've heard about lots of crashes or things that led to injury. Well, a quick look at the statistics and you'll find the probability of death on a U.S. commercial jet is 1 in 7 million. Compare that with 1 in 600 from smoking. This fact finding can shrink a fear. Create an action plan. Take one small step at a time. Going too fast or doing something too scary before you're ready can backfire, but it's also important to keep moving forward. Don't wait for your anxiety to disappear before taking a step forward, or you might find yourself waiting for a change that isn't going to come on its own. So, an action plan. Let's use public speaking as an example. Stand in front of a mirror and give a 2-minute talk. Record yourself giving a talk and then watch it back. Practice the talk in front of a partner. Practice the talk in front of a partner and one other person. Give the talk in a meeting at work. So you're taking baby steps toward your final goal. Another suggestion to overcome fear right now, seek a therapist. If your fears are debilitating, you aren't having much success facing them on your own, you're completely human in that. You have, again, a lot of company around you. Go ahead and seek the help of a trusted mental health professional. Fear-facing treatment may include acceptance and commitment therapy. It's called ACT. These involve accepting your fears in order to make them less threatening and less impactful on your life. Exposure therapy or immersion therapy is another tactic. The underlying principle is that through practice and experience, you will become more comfortable in situations that you would otherwise avoid. There's also psychoanalytic theory. Psychoanalysis aims to cure the fear or phobia by rooting out and solving the original conflict. Avoiding versus facing fears. It's worth talking about. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but while avoiding the situations you fear might make you feel better in the short run, avoidance can cause increased anxiety in the long term. When you completely avoid fears, you teach your amygdala or that lizard brain that you cannot handle that fear. On the contrary, when you gradually face fears in small doses, you help your brain become accustomed to the fear. So can fear teach us? And if so, what? Author and security expert Gavin DeBecker, in his book, The Gift of Fear, says, "You have the gift of a brilliant internal guardian that stands ready to warn you of hazards and guide you through risky situations. So what's the problem? Well, we're snobs, basically, when it comes to our intuition. He says Americans worship logic even when it's wrong and deny intuition even when it's right. Intuition connects us to the natural world and to our very nature. Freed from the bonds of judgment, married only to perception, it carries us to predictions we will later marvel at. Somehow I knew, we say, but when we take time to reflect backward, we see that our intuition connected dots before our brain had the chance to process and put meat on those logic bones. He said of his work, I'll be much praised for my skill, but most often I just listen and give them, his clients, permission to listen to themselves. Well, let this episode be your permission slip to listen to yourself again. Nature's greatest accomplishment, the human brain, is never more efficient or invested than when its host is at risk. Then intuition is catapulted to another level entirely, a height at which it can accurately be called graceful, even miraculous. Intuition, writes de Becker, is the journey from A to Z without stopping at any other letter along the way. It is knowing without knowing why. Yet, he reminds us that intuition is always right in two ways. It is always in response to something, and it always has your best interest at heart. De Becker's book was written 2 decades ago, but it's an incredible read. The knowledge it holds has stood up to time. In fact, a lot of things that I did as a parent were based on the teachings of his book. I'd take my kids to the mall and say, if you got lost right now, who would you ask for help? And they would always pick somebody, and that was very, a mother, for example. And I'd say, why? And they would bore down to it and say, because she reminded me of you, and I think that she would want to help me. So even as kids, their instincts were wonderful. So we need to reinforce our instincts. 2 other tips from inside of his book include advice that if you're in need of help from a stranger, like I mentioned with my kids, pick someone yourself. Don't let someone pick you, because the odds are it'd be mathematically impossible for you to pick a serial killer, but more possible for them to see you in a situation where you're vulnerable and pick you. Also, choose a woman, because most violent crime is committed by men. Finally, if you say no and someone doesn't listen, then ask yourself, why are they attempting to control me? Those 2 tidbits saved me from 2 situations I still think about that would have ended in violence. One was on this isolated path in Northern California. A man interrupted my run. My dog Journey, he was normally sweet and calm, he savagely barked when the man fell off his bike in slow motion right in our path. I felt rude, but taking Journey's cue, I knew this person intended to harm me. He asked for a hand up and I refused, saying I'd better keep moving or my dog would attack him. I sprinted away fast with Journey and ducked behind a stand of trees, where I watched the guy get back on his bike with no problem and ride back to the parking lot, where he loaded it into a creepy, rusted-out truck. The second time was when I worked in a skyscraper in downtown Seattle. I'd been working super late on a proposal and had zipped out of the office to get a bite to eat. When I returned to the building, the place was mostly empty. An elevator opened and a broad-shouldered man stood holding the door open. I was about to step inside and he said, Oh, are you afraid to ride up with a man alone? And I stepped backward. Are you scared? He continued, holding the door open, almost challenging me to ignore my intuition. I stood and looked him in the eye and said, I think I'll wait for the next one. Thanks. Being in a noise-proof metal box with a man in a mostly empty skyscraper seemed like a dangerous idea. And his reaction to try and bait me into ignoring my inner spidey sense only confirmed my hunch. Chances are I would have been fine in both situations, but then again, maybe I wouldn't have. I still remember them like they happened today, which tells me I was right. In this post-lockdown time, it's important not to get caught in fruitless fear loops. We went from being afraid of who occupied the Oval Office to how fast we might die of a virus, to the potential for nuclear war, to fill in the blank 3 months from now. It's a trap. It keeps us from engaging in the things we can touch and taste and feel in our immediate spheres. I remember as a kid when I watched the evening news for a history class, my teacher said, ask yourself when you worry, what can I do about this right now? News stories should end with a call to action. Otherwise, they can be corrosive to your soul. I'm paraphrasing here, but I've given that a lot of thought. Because of the emotional roller coaster of the last 5 years worth of news cycles, I made a New Year's resolution to stop watching the news. I even barred myself from reading news for a few months. It's been fantastic not to be on that perpetual news cycle roller coaster. I've returned to reading news, but I pick from sources on the extreme left and extreme right, employing a tactic taught to me by my communications professors at the University of Washington. Where these stories intersect, that is the provable truth. It has done much for my quality of life. It's evened me out emotionally. It's helped me to escape the fear loop I was caught up in, and I hadn't realized it. It's giving me back energy for other pursuits like this, like Curious Cat podcast and meditating and creating art for people I love. I'm not telling you this prescriptively. It's simply an anecdote. But if it resonates, well, then listen. If it doesn't, let it go. I offer it in love. So fear. Let's honor it, but not let it smother us. Let fear be a yield sign. When we encounter things that cause us to become afraid, get curious. Ask what fear wants you to notice. What path is it nudging you to take or not take? Can you listen to your intuition and chart a course that stretches your comfort zone while also honoring the passenger in the back seat? I'd love to know how you're commingling with fear. If you'd like, join the conversation on socials. Thank you for listening to Curious Cat. If you like the content, stories, and information, I'd be grateful if you could like and review us on your favorite streaming service. It'll help others find us as well. Huge gratitude for my art director and audio engineer. If you're in need of either of those services, please find their links in the show notes. Also, please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. As of this recording, I still have a handful of Curious Cat stickers. If you like and follow the show on your favorite listening app, share that photo with me in my DMs, and if you live in the United States, I'll mail you a sticker for free. Until next time, stay curious. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.